Hey everyone, before I get into tonight's story, I want to ask you to like the video, subscribe if you enjoy true horror stories, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. It helps more than you think. What I'm about to share is something I've never talked about outside of close friends. It happened years ago, during one of the worst Maine blizzards I ever worked. Even now, it still feels fresh, like the cold never fully left my bones. My name is Mark Delaney, and I serve as a Maine State Trooper for most of my adult life. I spent nearly all those years working the rural night shifts. If you've never been out on Route 11 near Patton after dark, especially in winter, it's hard to explain what that world feels like. The road cuts through miles of thick forest, old logging land, and forgotten trails. Houses sit far apart, golden windows glowing like distant beacons in an ocean of trees. That night, the wind was already throwing snow across the road in hard waves, like someone shaking white sheets over the entire state. The plows were hours behind, and most people had already hunkered down. But troopers don't get snow days, and I was assigned to check on stranded drivers, power outages, and the usual calls that come with storms like that. I had no idea the night would turn into something much darker than a simple blizzard patrol. I've always believed the woods in that area carry stories older than any of us. Some are written in the broken remains of old camps and the rusting frames of abandoned cabins. Others live in whispers passed down from the Penobscot, people who once moved through those same trees. Growing up, I heard tales of spirits watching from the branches during winter storms. As a trooper, I brushed those stories aside until the night they stopped feeling like stories. It was close to midnight when I first saw the figure. The snow was blowing sideways across the headlights, and everything looked like ghosts drifting through the beam. At first, I thought it was a moose because of the shape, tall, dark, moving slowly. But as I got closer, the silhouette sharpened into a human form. Someone was walking along the shoulder of Route 11, leaning into the storm like they were trying to push their way through a wall. I slowed down and rolled past them, expecting them to wave or at least turn their head toward the cruiser. They didn't. They just kept walking steady and slow, like they didn't feel the cold at all. My gut told me to stop and check on them. So I pulled over and let the engine idle. When I looked into the side mirror to get a better view, the figure was gone. Not walking away. Gone. Like they were never there. I stepped out of the cruiser, bracing myself as the wind slapped me across the face. My flashlight beam stretched across the snow, but there was nothing ahead of me except swirling white. I walked back toward where I'd seen the figure, but there were no footprints at all, not even the faint outline of a boot. The snow was fresh, soft, untouched. I felt a strange pressure in my chest, the kind that comes when the world stops making sense. I tried to tell myself visibility was messing with me. Whiteout conditions can play tricks on even the most seasoned troopers. Still, something about the way that figure moved didn't sit right. It was too steady, too calm for a night when even the deer hid deep under pines. I got back in the cruiser, shook off the cold, and kept driving. But the heater suddenly felt weaker, like the air inside the cabin had dropped a few degrees. The radio crackled every few minutes with storm updates, but most of the time it was nothing but static. Lines were freezing, towers were overloaded, and dispatch could barely hear us. As I reached a stretch of road with no houses for miles, the sky went even darker, the way it does when the snow thickens so much that the world feels buried. I started thinking about those old stories again, the ones I used to laugh at. One tale said the forest watchers walked during storms to search for lost souls. Another said they followed the ones who didn't respect the woods. I wasn't sure where I fit in that list, but I didn't want to think about it. I turned the radio volume up to drown out my own thoughts. That was when the static changed. It wasn't the usual hiss. It pulsed like someone breathing. Then, through the crackle, a faint voice whispered my name. I froze with my hand, hovering over the radio mic. At first, I thought it was dispatch trying to reach me, maybe battling interference. But the voice didn't sound like anyone from the barracks. It was low, distant, almost like someone whispering through a long tunnel. I stared at the radio as the sound faded back into static, trying to convince myself it was just cross signals. Snowstorms can make weird things happen on the airwaves, but this felt personal. I cleared my throat and called in, just to be safe, but no one answered. Only more static. I sat there listening, waiting for something else to break through. Nothing. The wind rocked the cruiser gently, like fingers tapping against the metal. For a moment, I thought about heading back to barracks, but we were short-staffed and people depended on us during storms like this. So I pushed forward, even though the silence inside the cruiser felt heavy. As I drove, the snow thickened so much that the front of the cruiser felt like it was pushing through wet cement. The headlights barely reached past the hood. The whole world shrank to a tunnel of white, and every shadow looked like it might be hiding something I didn't want to see. My mind kept circling back to the missing figure, the empty road, and that whispered voice. The blizzard seemed to close around me like a living thing. I turned onto a section of Route 11 that always creeped me out, even in clear weather. The trees grow closer here, almost arching over the road. Locals swear the area is haunted by old logging accidents and the spirits of men who died working the land. I never believed that stuff, but that night, with the snow hitting the windshield like nails, I started to think about how many people had disappeared in storms just like this one. A pair of old cabins sat somewhere off the east side of that stretch, half swallowed by pines. I couldn't see them through the storm, but I knew they were there. Hunters used them decades ago before the land was abandoned. My father once told me he'd checked those cabins during a winter patrol and found carved symbols on the beams. Symbols he said he'd never seen before. He never explained more than that, and I never asked. The radio clicked again, softer this time, like someone tapping the speaker from inside. I reached the mic, but before I touched it, the voice returned. It whispered my name again, slower, stretched out like a breath freezing in the air. I felt the hairs rise on the back of my neck. I wanted to call out, to demand who was speaking, but the sound slipped away before I could form a word. The static faded into silence. I tried to steady my breathing. I told myself I was tired, cold, and letting the storm get into my head. I'd seen strange things on night shifts before. Animals acting odd, shadows moving where they shouldn't, engines dying for no reason. But nothing like this. I adjusted my grip on the wheel and kept moving, creeping along the road. Every part of me felt tense, waiting for something else to appear out of the swirling snow ahead. The figure from earlier haunted my thoughts. The steady walk, the way they didn't turn their head, the fact that there were no footprints at all. I've been on enough calls to know how easy it was for lost travelers to panic and run deeper into the woods. But this didn't feel like that. This felt intentional, like whatever I saw wanted to be seen, at least for a moment, and then wanted to vanish just as quickly. The storm howled harder, rattling the windows. I found myself leaning forward, squinting, as if that extra inch would make the road clearer. The world outside felt far away, muted and strange, like I'd slipped into another layer of the woods where normal rules didn't apply. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard and realized only a few minutes had passed since I first saw the figure. It felt like much longer, like time itself was stretching. As I reached the top of a small hill, the radio snapped alive again, louder this time. The static screeched, filling the cruiser like a scream. I grabbed the mic, ready to call dispatch, but before I could speak, the voice whispered my name one last time, clearer than before, almost right beside me. Then the radio went dead. My hands trembled on the wheel. Whatever was out there in the storm wasn't finished with me yet. And I didn't know it then, but the night was only beginning. The storm outside, my cruiser felt heavier after that last whisper on the radio. Whatever was out there in the blizzard wasn't finished with me. I tightened my grip on the wheel and told myself to think like a trooper, not a scared kid. Focus on the road. Focus on the work. Up ahead, Route 11 curved toward Shin Pond, a place I knew too well. In summer, it was full of campers and canoes, and kids screaming as they jumped into freezing water. In winter, it turned into bare trees, black ice, and a quiet that felt older than the road itself. Tonight, the pond and the woods around it were hidden behind blowing snow, but I could feel where they were, like a dark weight off to my right. My headlights pushed through a solid sheet of white. The wipers dragged back and forth, barely keeping up. No other cars. No plow trucks. Just my cruiser and the storm. I was thinking about turning back to higher ground for a better radio signal when two dim red dots appeared ahead of me, swimming in the snow. Taillights, off to the right, where an old gravel pull-off sat half buried beside the trees. I eased off the gas and let the cruiser crawl closer, that familiar tight feeling settling in my gut. A vehicle stopped out here in a storm like this was never a good sign. I pulled in behind the SUV and flipped on my flashers. Red and blue light bounced off the swirling flakes, painting the night in sick colors. For a few seconds, I just sat there, listening to the wind slam the doors and watching the empty shape of the SUV ahead of me. Okay, I muttered, stranded driver. That's all. Saying out loud helped a little. I pulled on my hat and gloves, opened the door, and stepped into the storm. The cold hit like a fist. Snow stung my cheeks and tried to crawl down my collar. I hunched my shoulders and pushed forward until my knee bumped the rear bumper. It was a dark midsize with main plates, rear end turned toward the woods, snow already wrapping around its tires like fingers. I cupped a gloved hand around my flashlight and shined it through the driver's window. The glass was fog along the edges, like someone had been breathing there not long ago. Inside, I saw a child's booster seat in the back, a couple of grocery bags on the floor, a heavy winter coat thrown across the passenger seat. No one behind the wheel. No movement at all. I tried the door. It opened on the first pull, and a thin wave of warmer air brushed my face. I leaned in and swept the beam across the interior. No one hiding on the floor. No one slumped over the steering wheel. No blood on the dash. When I pressed my glove to the fabric of the driver's seat, it felt faintly warm, like someone had just climbed out. State Police. I called into the empty car. If you're nearby, you need to answer me. Only the wind answered, pushing at my back. I dug through the glove box until I found the registration. Local address. Someone who thought they could beat the storm home. I stepped back and shut the door. The sound landed flat in the heavy air. My flashlight cut a narrow tunnel through the snow as I swept it across the ground. It didn't take long. A single line of footprints led away from the driver's door, across the pull-off, and straight toward the tree line. The prints were deep and sharp, each heel and toe clear despite the storm. No smaller prints. No second set. Just one lonely path going into the woods. I circled the SUV once, looking for a collapsed shape in the drifts, but the snow lay smooth and empty. Training said I needed to follow. In a blizzard like this, a person on foot could get turned around in minutes and disappear for good. If they were still walking, I might catch them. If they were down, I might at least bring them home. Still, I stopped at the edge of the trees and felt my feet hesitate. The darkness between the trunks didn't just look black. It felt black, like it had weight. The woods remember things. My father had told me once, driving the same stretch on a bright day. Back then I'd shrugged it off. Tonight, it slid back into my head like a warning. I pulled my scarf tighter, drew in a breath that burned my lungs, and stepped after the prints. The snow came up halfway to my shins, dragging at every stride. I kept my light fixed on the trail and counted the steps just to keep my mind busy. 10, 15, 20. With each step, the sound of the road behind me faded. The flashing lights of my cruiser turned into a faint red and blue glow behind the trees. When I finally stopped, the world around me had gone strangely quiet, as if someone had turned the volume down on the storm. I could still hear the wind high in the branches, but down at ground level, everything felt muffled and close. My own breathing sounded too loud. Hello. I called. State Police. You need to come back to your vehicle. My voice didn't echo. It just slipped into the dark. I tried again, louder, the words puffing out as white vapor. If you can hear me, call out, I'm here to help you. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then a single word brushed the side of my head like warm breath. Help. It was quiet and strained, barely louder than the wind. It came from my left, close, too close. Not from ahead where the footprints led, but from somewhere almost over my shoulder, as if a mouth were hidden just under the edge of my hat. I spun toward the sound, swinging the beam of the flashlight with me. Snow and dark trunks stared back. No figure ducking behind a tree. No new trail stamped into the white. only the neat line of prints I'd been following and my own deep boot marks behind me. The hairs on the back of my neck lifted. "Where are you?" I shouted, my voice sharper than before. "Call again so I can find you." The only answer at first was a soft patter of fresh snow landing on old. I forced my legs to move and stepped back onto the trail. 10 more prints. 20. The steps ahead of me stayed steady and straight. No stumbling, no signs of panic. Whoever made them had walked deeper into the trees, as calmly as if they were on a sidewalk. Then the word came again, this time against my right ear. "Help." Same tone. Same thin, strained sound. But there was something wrong in it. Something hollow, like somebody copying the shape of fear without feeling it. I recoiled from the voice and nearly lost my balance, boots slipping sideways. The flashlight beam whipped across the trees and snow, catching nothing but bare bark and falling flakes. The ground where the sound should have come from lay smooth and untouched. That cold knot that lives in every copse gut tightened hard. The small inner voice that kept me alive more than once spoke up loud and clear. Stop. People died out here when they ignored that voice. I'd seen the aftermath too many times. Hunters who went one ridge farther, hikers who tried for a shortcut. They all thought they'd be fine until the moment they weren't. I thought of my kids asleep at home, my wife watching the storm crawl across the news, my father's tired eyes after long winter shifts on the same road. I took one more cautious step along the line of prints and lifted the light. The next footprint should have been there. It wasn't. The trail simply ended. I crouched closer, my knees creaking inside the uniform. The final print sat sharp and perfect in the snow, heel, arch, and toe all clear. After it, the white surface spread untouched in every direction. No half-erased mark. No drag. No sign of someone stepping aside or collapsing where they stood. Whoever I had been following had taken that last step and left nothing behind. The storm above us seemed to take a deep breath. Then the wind roared to the branches again, shaking snow down in thick sheets. My flashlight flickered once. That was enough for me. I turned and followed my own tracks back toward the faint red and blue glow of the road, moving faster now. The quiet, heavy feeling that had wrapped around me before was gone. In its place came rushing air and the slap of snow against my legs. I kept my eyes on my boot marks and did not look left or right. Breaking out of the trees felt like waking up. My cruiser sat where I had left it, lights spinning, the abandoned SUV still ahead in my beams. I climbed into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and locked it without thinking. For a moment I just sat there, heart pounding, listening to the storm hammer the roof. Get it together, I told myself. Do the job. I grabbed the radio mic. Dispatch, this is Unit 12 at the Shin Pond pull-off. I said, abandoned vehicle, possible missing driver. Requesting. Static exploded from the speaker, sharp and violent. Under the hiss came a thick, wet sound, like someone trying to breathe through frozen lungs. Dispatch, I said. For a moment, I thought I heard my call sign. Then the gurgling swallowed it, and the radio snapped into silence. Outside, the SUV crouched in my headlights. A tall shadow slid across the road just beyond the beams, gliding instead of walking and vanished into the trees. My eyes followed and caught on something hanging from a low branch, a small wooden charm on a strip of leather, turning slowly in the wind. The wooden charm spun on the branch like it was being twirled by invisible fingers. The leather strap creaked as the wind tugged at it, except there was no wind. Not anymore. The storm that had been clawing at the trees minutes earlier seemed to hold its breath all at once. The flakes drifted down instead of blowing sideways. The world felt paused, like a scene pulled out of time. I stared at the charm, feeling that same cold knot in my chest tighten again. The carving looked handmade, rough and old, a circle with lines etched across it like rays or branches. Something about it stirred a memory I didn't want to think too hard about. I forced myself to look away and started the cruiser, letting the engine growl back to life. My hands shook a little as I pulled out of the snowy pull-off. I told myself the charm was probably nothing, maybe something dropped by a hunter or a camper from earlier that fall. But I didn't believe it. The storm, the missing driver, the voice in the trees, the shadow, now this. It all stacked up wrong, like a puzzle made of pieces from different boxes. The heater fought against the cold pressing in through the windows. My breath fogged the air for a moment before the vents cleared it. I needed warmth. I needed a plan. And more than anything, I needed to think somewhere that wasn't surrounded by miles of black forest. That was when I remembered the old cabin. It sat maybe 15 minutes from Shin Pond, tucked off a logging road that barely existed anymore. It used to belong to the Maine Warden Service decades ago, back before radios got better and trucks could handle deeper snow. My dad had mentioned it once or twice when I was younger, always with a tone like he was talking about something he didn't fully trust. And he had mentioned someone else too, Elias Crowley, a warden who worked these woods back in the late 70s or early 80s. A quiet man, according to my dad, kept to himself. Spent more nights in the cabin than at home. Said the woods spoke louder than people ever did. I hadn't thought about him in years, not until the shadow crossed the road and the charm swayed like it was alive. Dad once said Elias saw things in storms. When I asked what that meant, he'd only shrugged, staring out the window like he was remembering something he didn't want to. He talked about lights, figures, voices, stuff you don't put in a report. My father wasn't a superstitious man. If anything, he was too grounded. But he had looked afraid when he said that. I turned onto a narrow road that disappeared under a blanket of snow. My headlights brushed against frozen branches crowding the sides. The storm returned in low bursts, whining through the trees and kicking snow up across the hood. The cruiser bumped over hidden ruts. The woods closed in, thicker than before. Every shadow felt like a shape waiting to step forward. At last, I reached the old break in the trees and saw the faint outline of the cabin. It sat back on the road, half buried in drifts. The roof sagged under years of winter weight. One window was boarded up, another cracked like something had hit it long ago. The porch lamp, a dented metal thing, hung crooked beside the door. I parked and shut off the engine. The sudden quiet made my stomach twist. The only sound was the slow tick of cooling metal from the cruiser. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out. The snow was deeper here, packing around my boots as I trudged up to the porch. The boards creaked under my weight. I reached for the latch, expecting it to be frozen shut, but the door swung open at the slightest touch. I froze, hand still on the handle. These doors were supposed to be bolted. Every warden cabin was. They weren't for the public. Not anymore. Only the state had keys. And even if a key holder had been here recently, no one in their right mind would have left a door unlocked during a storm like this. The warm, stale smell of old wood drifted out. I stepped inside, unsure if I was walking into safety or something worse. The air was surprisingly still, almost warmer than outside. My flashlight swept across dusty shelves, an old cot, a rusting metal stove, and walls lined with maps pinned under cracked glass. Papers curled with age sat stacked on a table, and on the far shelf lay a faded green journal. I closed the door behind me, more for my sanity than for warmth. The wind outside faded into a distant hum. Inside, everything felt strangely untouched, like the cabin had been waiting. I walked toward the shelf and picked up the journal. The cover was cracked, the corners rounded from years of use. Faint letters were burned into the leather. E. Crowley. My throat tightened as I opened it. The handwriting inside was tight and careful. The ink faded but still readable. I skimmed the first few entries, weather notes, patrol observations, usual warden stuff. But the further I flipped, the stranger the entries became. Words like lights and figures kept appearing in the margins. Mentions of hunters who never returned. Reports of hearing someone call out in storms when no one was nearby. One entry made my stomach drop. Saw it again tonight, near the South Ridge. Tall, pale, no face. Not walking, gliding. Storm was strong, but the snow didn't move around it. Stood there watching me. Felt like the woods were holding their breath. My pulse hammered in my ears. That matched what I saw on the road less than an hour ago. Every detail. Even the part about the snow not moving around it. I kept reading. Talked to Tom Delaney today. He came by the cabin after shift. Said he's seen it too. Said watches people who wander where they shouldn't. told me to stay out of the woods during storms. Tom Delaney, my father. My hand tightened on the journal. Dad had never mentioned this. He'd never said he'd seen anything out here. Not once. And he sure never said he'd warned Elias. I turned another page. Locals call it by an old Penobscot name, the White Watcher. They believe it protects the deep woods, not from harm, but from people like us, people who don't listen. It appears in winter storms, walks the edges of the trees, watches travelers who get lost. Some say it calls their names. Some say it leads them away. Some say it takes them. The next sentence was smeared, like Elias had dragged his hand across wet ink. The woods remember what we forget. I lowered the book and exhaled shakily. The room felt heavier now, as if the walls themselves were listening. I walked to a map pinned above the desk and brushed dust from its surface. Red circles marked areas I knew well. Shin Pond, the ridge above the logging road, the old trail near Route 11. All places hunters had vanished over the decades. All places my father used to warn me to avoid at night. Outside, the wind suddenly died again. Not ease died. 1 second it howled against the roof. The next, silence. Thick, total silence. I stood still, breath held. My ears strained for any noise. A creak from the rafters. A groan from the porch. Anything. But the world outside stayed impossibly still. Even the usual settling noises inside the cabin seemed to stop. Then, knock. A slow, heavy thump against the wall. Not the door. The wall on my left. My flashlight trembled slightly as I turned toward the sound. The cabin had no outbuildings. Nothing leaning against the exterior. Something had hit that wall deliberately. Knock. Again. Low. Measured. Like someone tapping with the side of their fist. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to breathe. I edged toward the window, my boots whispering over the dusty floor. When I reached it, I inched 2 fingers under the plywood board covering the glass and lifted it just enough to look outside. What I saw made my breath snag in my throat. Footprints. Fresh ones. Circling the cabin. Perfect boot prints. Deep and sharp, walking full loops around the structure. The snow should have filled them in instantly. The storm had been pounding this area nonstop. But these prints were crisp, untouched, as if made seconds earlier. I followed the trail with my eyes, heart pounding. The prints loop around the cabin twice, maybe 3 times. They came close to the window where I stood, then veered toward the back, disappearing into the darkness. A shiver crawled up my spine. The shape of the soles, the tread pattern, even the distance between steps. I recognized them. They matched the exact same prints I'd followed away from the stranded SUV. The ones that had vanished into thin air in the woods. The ones that stopped abruptly with no trace of a body or struggle. Whoever, or whatever, had made them hadn't vanished after all. It had been here, walking around this cabin, watching me. My breath fogged the window board. I lowered it slowly, backing away from the glass. My pulse throbbed in my ears. I clutched Elias Crowley's journal tightly, without realizing I still held it. Whatever the White Watcher was, spirit, legend, echo of the storm, the old warden had seen it. My father had seen it. And now it was circling the same cabin they had both visited. The silence outside deepened, settling over the cabin like a thick blanket. I felt something shift in the air, subtle but unmistakable, like a presence leaning closer. I didn't know it yet, but someone else was out there in that storm. Someone the Watcher wasn't finished with. Someone I would meet soon. Someone named Laura Bishop, and she was running out of time. Her name was Laura Bishop. I didn't know that when I first saw the abandoned SUV or the footprints in the snow. I only knew there was someone missing, and the woods were not acting right. I learned her name later, standing in that old warden's cabin with Elias Crowley's journal under my arm and my nerves shot from the silence pressing on the walls. I keyed my portable radio. Unit 12 to dispatch. I said, "Be advised, I'm sheltering at the old warden cabin off the Shin Pond Road. Visibility's dropping fast." Static hissed, then cleared just enough. "Copy, Unit 12." Dispatch answered. Her voice sounded thin and far away. "We got a new call for you." I stepped closer to the table without thinking, as if a few inches would help the signal. The journal shifted under my elbow. "Go ahead," I said. "Missing person out of Millinocket," she said. "Female, 34, named Laura Bishop. Last seen driving north toward Patton this afternoon before the blizzard. Husband reports she never arrived. Plate is Maine 63. She read off the numbers. They matched the SUV. I closed my eyes for a second. "I have that vehicle," I said. "Empty. Driver's seat still warm. Single set of footprints heading into the woods. No sign of the driver." There was a short pause on the line. "Copy," dispatch said. "Search and rescue can't reach you until the storm eases. You're closest. See what you can do, but don't take unnecessary risks." "Understood," I said. I moved to clip the radio back to my belt. "Help," a woman whispered. The words slid through the speaker so softly I almost thought I imagined it. It wasn't dispatch. It wasn't any trooper. It was young and scared and shaking. "Dispatch, repeat last transmission?" I asked. Nothing. Just a low roll of static. "Help, please." The same voice, a little clearer. It sounded like she was standing close and far away at the same time. I swallowed. "Laura? Is this Laura Bishop?" A faint rush of sound came through, like wind against a microphone. Then a single word. "Cold." The hairs on my arms went up. I pictured that empty SUV. The warm seat. The footprints marching into trees that seemed to swallow sound. I thought of my father telling me once that the worst feeling on this job wasn't finding a body. It was knowing you hadn't tried hard enough to stop it from becoming one. "The woods remember things," he used to say. Maybe they remember that too. I slid the journal inside my coat, grabbed my flashlight, and stepped back out into the storm. The wind hit like a fist, hard and steady, forcing me to lower my head. Snow slapped my face and tried to crawl down my collar. Behind me, the cabin looked small and dark, like the woods were already closing around it again. I pushed toward the trees, following my own tracks back until I found a line of prints that had led to the cabin. They were still there, deep clean, untouched by drifting snow. They circled the building once, then turned and ran straight into the thicker pines. "Laura," I shouted. "This is Trooper Delaney. Keep talking so I can find you." The only answer was the wind scraping against branches somewhere high above. I followed anyway. Once I was under the trees, the storm changed. The wind thinned out to a distant roar. Snow still fell, but it came down straight and slow, thick enough to blur the trunks and hide the sky. My flashlight carved a tunnel of pale light ahead. The footprints led down a shallow slope into brush. Twigs grabbed at my legs and snapped under my boots. I slipped once and banged my knee but kept moving. The prints never wobbled or dragged. Whoever made them had walked like they knew exactly where they were going. Something dark hung from a low branch ahead. My light caught it and held. It was a strip of dark blue fabric, frozen into a stiff twist. I pulled it free and scraped away a thin crust of ice. Heavy material, lined, the kind used in winter coats. A little white tag stuck out from the torn seam. Bishop L. The letters were small and plain, but they hit like a shout. "You're close," I said under my breath. "You have to be." I stuffed the cloth into my pocket and followed the tracks deeper. "Help." The word drifted out from ahead, clear and thin. I stopped at once. "I'm here." I called. "Laura, keep talking." "Help, please." The voice slid sideways. Off to my left, same distance away, same tone. I swung the flashlight in that direction. The beam caught trunks and snow and nothing else. "Go back." Another voice whispered beside my right ear. I flinched so hard I almost dropped the light. This voice was different. Low, old, scraped raw by time. It sounded like someone standing close enough to touch my shoulder. I spun in a slow circle. Only my own print stood behind me. "Who's there?" I demanded. "Laura, is somebody with you?" "Help." The first voice begged again. "Please." "Go back," the second insisted. "Turn around, boy. Don't you follow it." I lifted the light higher, searching the branches for any wrong shape. Nothing. I kept moving. The brush thinned. The trees pulled back until I stepped into a long, straight gap between rows of old stumps. The ground was smoother here, almost level under the snow. The trees along the sides lined up in tired, even ranks. An old logging road. I had worked this area for years. I had never seen it on any map. The footprint stepped onto it, without hesitating. Laura's voice came again, ahead down the pale track. Help! This time it was sharper, ragged around the edges. I stepped onto the road and followed. For a while there was only the crunch of my boots and the softest of falling snow. The road dipped and rose. The storm's roar sounded far away, as if the sky had moved higher. Then I heard a rough wheeze. A cough. The sound came from up ahead and to the right. State Police. I shouted, Call out. A shape stepped out from behind a spruce. An old man in a long wool coat, the hem stiff with ice. A fur hat jammed low on his head. White beard hardened with frost. His cheeks were red and raw. His eyes peered at me from under heavy lids. Easy, I said, hurrying closer. Sir, are you hurt? He squinted at my badge, then at my face. Something like recognition tugged one corner of his mouth. You're Delaney's boy, he croaked. The words knocked something loose inside me. My father was Tom Delaney, I said. You knew him? Everybody up here knew Tom, he said. His voice sounded dry, like he hadn't spoken in hours. He walked these roads enough, saw what he shouldn't be. I slipped a hand under his elbow. His arm felt light inside the bulky coat. What's your name? Harlan Pike, he said. Been near that pond longer than you've been alive. He nodded at the prints on the road. Been trying to catch that woman same as you. She shouldn't have been out when the storm woke up. You mean when the blizzard started? I asked. He shook his head. Storm's just a cover, he said. I'm talking about what walks under it. A cold line slid down my spine. What walks under it, Harlan? He looked past me, down the road, eyes far away. The White Watcher, he whispered. Storm like this stirs it, makes it hungry. It moves when the woods can't see themselves and people forget where they are. Takes folks that get lost out here. Sometimes it lets them go again. His mouth tightened, but they don't come back the same. I thought of the journal against my chest. The entry about a tall, pale figure in a storm. My father's name written there. I thought of Dad staring at the tree line some nights, like he expected something to step out and look back at him. You really saw it? I asked. I don't tell stories, Harlan said. I remember, tall as a young pine, thin, white like packed snow. Couldn't keep its face straight in my head. Brain slid right off it. It looked me over like a man looks at a stain on his boot. He glanced at me. Your father saw it too. Came out of the storm white as paper. Never spoke on it. But he was quieter after, like part of him stayed out here. My chest ached. I wonder what else my father had decided not to tell me. You think it is Laura? I asked. Harlan's gaze dropped to the footprints. If it noticed her, it has her, he said. Question is what it's doing now that you're walking in its steps. Before I could answer, Laura's voice cut through the quiet. Help! This time it was close. Straight ahead on the road. Raw and cracked. I eased Harlan back against a tree. Stay here, I said. I'll send somebody for you as soon as I can. He grabbed my sleeve with surprising strength. If it calls your name, don't you answer, he said. That's how it gets in. That's how it follows you home. I'll be back, I promised, gently pulling free. I moved on alone, following the faint prints into thickening white. The wind rose again, spinning the snow into a tight moving tunnel around me. My light felt small and weak inside it. Then the wind stopped. The flakes fell straight down. The roar of the storm pulled away until it sounded like it belonged to some other place. She was standing in the middle of the road. Laura wore a dark winter coat that hung open. Snow clung to the fabric and to her hair. Her arms dangled at her sides. She did not shiver. She did not move. I raised my flashlight, my hand shaking now, and brought the beam up to her face. Her skin was almost as pale as the snow. Her lips were cracked. For a heartbeat, I thought she was simply frozen with shock. Then I saw her eyes. Her irises were pale and cloudy, almost white, like someone had poured milk into them and stirred. No light bounced off them. They looked flat and wrong, like glass painted over. The air between us felt thin, brittle, ready to break. She stared straight at me with those milky eyes, as if she'd been waiting in that silent road for me. She didn't blink. For a moment, it felt like even the storm paused. Snow drifted between us. My flashlight shook in my hand. "Laura," I called. "My name is Mark. I'm with the state police. I'm here to get you out of here, okay?" Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Her breath did not fog the air. Those milky eyes didn't follow the light. They stayed locked on my face, empty and tired. I took one slow step toward her. The air shifted, sharp and thin, like I'd stepped over an invisible line. My stomach dropped. Every part of me screamed that this was close enough. "Don't," Harlan rasped from behind me. "Don't you walk closer when it's looking at you like that." I glanced back. He was a hunched shadow on the edge of the logging road, one gloved hand braced on a tree. When I turned to Laura again, she was already coming apart, her outline frayed. Pale dust streamed from her shoulders, her hair, her hands. The snow rose up around her like smoke. For a heartbeat, I saw her eyes again, wide and lost. Then she blew away. She didn't turn or run. She just vanished into the storm, breaking into white pieces that folded into the falling snow. "Laura," I lunged forward, boots plunging into the drift where she had stood. My light hit nothing but white. No body, no new tracks, no sign she'd ever been there. Behind me, something heavy hit the ground. I spun and saw Harlan crumpled on his side, legs twisted under him. His hat lay in the snow. His white hair stuck to his forehead with frost. "Hey!" I stumbled back toward him. "Harlan, stay with me." I dropped to my knees beside him. His eyes were half open, glassy, but a thin breath slipped between his lips. "Don't chase it," he whispered. "That's what it wants. Takes you deeper till you don't remember why you were out here." The trees leaned in on both sides of the narrow road. The wind circled us instead of blowing straight. I felt like we were standing at the center of a slow, white whirlpool. "We need shelter," I said. "Right now, you're going to freeze." He gave a dry, broken laugh. "If I die tonight, it won't be the cold that does it." I hooked my arms under his and hauled him up. He was lighter than he looked, all coat and bone. My legs burned, but I wasn't leaving him in the open. "Come on," I grunted. "There has to be something. A shed, a pump house, anything." "Service shed," he muttered, nodding toward the right. "Old one, from the logging days. Roof might still be there." I followed his nod, shuffling us both off the road and into the trees. The snow climbed higher, dragging at my knees. Branches slapped my shoulders. At last, through the swirl, I saw a squat dark shape crouched among the trunks. The shed sagged low to the ground, half buried in snow. A rusted metal roof bent under the weight. The boards were gray and warped. The door hung crooked, leaving a narrow black gap. It wasn't much, but it was more than we had. I kicked the door wider and dragged Harlan inside. The air smelled like oil, damp wood, and old dust. My flashlight swept over rusted tools, a broken ladder, a toppled metal cabinet, a heap of rotted rags in the corner. I lowered Harlan onto a stack of warped boards. "Stay awake," I told him, fingers on his neck. A weak pulse fluttered there. "You go to sleep now. I'm going to have to explain that to a lot of people." He gave a faint smile. "Always thinking about paperwork," he croaked. "Talk to me," I said, wanting him awake, wanting any sound but the storm. "You said you've seen the Watcher since you were a boy. What did you mean it chooses?" His eyes drifted to the cracked roof. "I first saw it at 10, he said, "lost in the trees. It stood at a clearing's edge, tall, thin, white, just watching me." He swallowed. "I knew if I walked toward it, I was done," he said. I turned away, expecting to die, and somehow walked straight into my own yard. I thought of Elias Crowley's journal press inside my coat. The entries about a tall, pale figure, about missing hunters, about my father coming to the same kind of cabin, saying he'd seen it too, And you kept seeing it? I asked. Storm after storm, he said. Sometimes far off, sometimes close enough the cold rolled off it like smoke. It weighs people. Some it takes. Some it leaves wrong. Laura's milky stare flashed in my head. My father's tired face followed. The way he used to look at the woods like they held a secret he couldn't quite bear. It chooses who can leave, Harlan said, voice thinning. And sometimes who has to stay. But if it calls your name, you don't answer. Not if you want your soul to stay the same shape. That's the third time you've told me. I said, trying to sound lighter than I felt. I'm getting the message. He tried to chuckle, but it turned into a cough that rattled his chest. I squeezed his shoulder. We wait here, I said. When the storm lets up, I'll get you and Laura both out. That's the plan. As if the storm heard me, the wind outside rose. The shed shivered. Old boards creaked and popped. Dust sifted down from the roof. I wiped it from my eyelashes and listened. Thump. The sound came from the left wall. Not a branch. Not loose boards. A heavy weight settling on frozen ground. Thump. From the rear this time, near a bulging panel. The hairs on my arms lifted. I turned my light toward the back wall. The boards trembled under a slow, spreading pressure, like something huge was sliding along them. Harlan's fingers locked on my wrist. Don't look, he whispered. I need to know where it is. I whispered back. It knows where you are, he said. That's enough. The shed jolted hard, tools on the wall rattling, the broken ladder hopping an inch. The wind didn't sound strong enough to do that. Whatever walked out, there weighed more than snow and air. Something scraped along the front, just below the doorframe. A long, slow drag, like a hand sliding over the wood. I moved to a knot where two boards didn't quite meet. A thin crack showed a slice of white outside. Every part of me screamed to stay back. I bent anyway and brought my eye to the gap. The snow outside fell straight down, slow and heavy. Only a few feet from the shed, something tall and pale moved through it. It didn't step. It glided. Its body was long and narrow, stretched wrong, white from head to toe. Where its feet should sink, the snow stayed smooth. It slid over instead. My gaze slid over where its face should be. I couldn't hold the shape in my mind. It was like trying to remember a dream that peeled away each time I reached for it. My breath fogged the crack. For one awful second, I thought the cloud would billow out into the open air. The pale head turned. Slowly, very slowly, until I felt, without seeing its eyes, that it was looking straight at the boards, straight at me. Painful pressure crushed my chest. I dropped back and pressed my spine to the wall, as if that extra inch wood might keep it out of my thoughts. Behind me, Harlan made a tiny, broken sound. I crawled back to him. His eyes were closed. His chest was still. Harlan, I whispered, "Hey, come on, not now." I pressed my fingers against his throat. His skin was stone cold. No pulse. I grabbed his wrist. Nothing. The old man who knew this place better than anyone was gone without a word. I knelt there on the cold floor with my hand on his coat, feeling more alone than I ever had. The radio at my belt exploded. Static screamed from the radio, shrill and violent like tearing metal. I twisted the dial, but nothing changed. The noise only grew, filling my head. Delaney, a voice roared under static, stretched and warped. Delaney. I froze. It sounded like my father, and it didn't. Answer me. It hissed, splintering and reforming. Mark, answer. My skin crawled. Harlan's warning rang through my head. If it calls your name, don't answer. I squeezed the radio hard enough to hurt and slammed the power off. The screaming cut off mid-howl, leaving the shed echoing with thick, heavy silence. Outside, the storm shifted. I stood and crept back to the crack, pulled by something I didn't want to name. The white shape was gone. The snowfield lay still, flakes drifting in soft curtains. For a moment, I wondered if fear and darkness had invented it. Then I saw her. Laura stood several yards away, just beyond the shed near the first trees. Her coat hung open. Her hair floated. She faced us, lips pale, eyes clouded. One arm was raised, hand turned up, fingers curling in a weak beckon. Come. That was what it looked like she was saying, though her mouth didn't move. I squinted at the snow behind her. Her shadow stretched out along the white, long and thin, reaching far past where it should, slipping around trunks, twisting like spilled ink. It was a wrong shape. Too long, too narrow, as if it belonged to something taller standing just behind her. My heart pounded. Every sane thought screamed at me to stay inside, brace the door, wait for daylight, for backup, for anything. But another part of me, the stubborn part that had followed footprints into the trees and carried Harlan here, knew hiding wouldn't fix this. I looked down at Harlan one last time. I heard you, I whispered. I won't answer when it calls. But I can't leave her. The shed creaked as I opened the door. Cold air rushed in, sharp enough to burn my lungs. Snow swirled in the doorway like it was trying to keep me inside. I stepped out anyway, boots sinking deep, the sky pressing low. Each step toward her felt like walking off the edge of the world. But I kept going, my heart hammering so hard I could hear it over the wind. Behind me, the shed seemed to shrink into the dark, already half swallowed by falling snow. Ahead, Laura's pale shape waited at the edge of the trees, her wrong shadow stretched behind her. I knew, with a cold clarity, that wherever she led me, the storm was coming too, to finally arrive. She didn't move when I stepped out of the shed. Her pale shape waited at the edge of the trees, that wrong shadow stretching behind her like a long stain on the snow. The farther I walked, the less real the shed felt, like it belonged to another world. Laura, I called, my voice rough. We're going back to the road. I'm here to take you home. She tilted her head, those milky eyes fixed on me. Instead of answering, she turned and stepped backward into the trees. Wait, I said, but my boots were already following. Her shadow slid over the snow between the trunks, stretched longer than it should. The storm clawed at my coat. Snow grabbed at my shins. Training told me to stop and call for backup that couldn't reach me. But I kept seeing her empty SUV on Route 11, the torn piece of coat in my pocket, her voice over the radio whispering help. So I followed. The deeper we went, the stranger the storm sounded. It stopped being simple wind and became something like slow breathing pulled through the branches. The trees grew taller and leaned toward each other. Then the sound cut off. No wind, no hiss of snow, no creak of wood. The silence landed so hard my ears rang. I pushed past the last line of pines and stepped into a clearing. It was a perfect circle, ringed by tall, dark pines. Snow covered the ground in a smooth sheet. At the edge of the trees, I could see the blizzard still raging, snow flying sideways, branches whipping, but nothing fell inside the circle. Not one flake crossed that invisible line. It was like a glass dome had been dropped over that spot. Laura stood near the center. Here, she looked more human. Her hair hung straight instead of drifting. A faint color touched her cheeks. Her eyes were still pale, but I could see the darker ring of her irises. Laura, I said, can you hear me? She turned toward me. Her lips shook. I want to go home, she whispered. Her voice sounded small and raw, but real. Please, I just want to go home. Relief rushed through me so hard my knees went weak. Good, I said. Your husband called. He's waiting. We just have to get you back to the road. I'll call an ambulance to meet us. She shook her head. It won't let me, she said. It keeps me here. It keeps all of us. A cold line crept up my back. All who? I asked. Her gaze slid to the trees. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw other shapes between the trunks. Thin gray outlines, blurred faces watching. Then they were gone. People who walked too far in, she said. People who forget where they were going. People who were already lost before the snow found them. Her words landed harder than they should have. I thought of long night shifts, quiet rooms at home, calls I didn't return. My father's old line came back. The woods remember things. The White Watcher, I said. She flinched. Don't call it that, she whispered. Names make it look at you. I've already seen it, I said. On the road, outside the shed. It knows I'm here. She hugged herself. It waits in storms, she said. It walks under them while everyone hides inside. It watches the ones who slip off the roads. It weighs them, decides who leaves and who stays. It likes the ones with cracks. Her eyes searched my face like she could see every crack. I'm fine, I said, and heard the lie. She didn't push it. Please, she said again. Help me. I can feel pieces of me coming loose. Names. Places. If I stay much longer, I won't know myself. I stepped closer. The air in the clearing felt thick, but I kept moving. When I reached her, I held out my hand. Take my hand, I said. We walk out together. Keep your eyes on me. Don't listen to anything else. Whatever happens, don't let go. Her fingers slid into mine. They were cold but solid. I held on like she was the one keeping me steady. We walked toward the trees. The moment we crossed the edge of the clearing, the world twisted. The trunks stretched taller, twisting like rope. Branches that had been high overhead bent low. The snow under our boots darkened for a second, like a shadow moved beneath it, then turned white again. My stomach lurched, like stepping onto a moving floor. Keep going, I said, one step at a time. Don't look around. The roar of the storm slammed back in, then cut out, then returned. It came in slow pulses, like a giant heart beating somewhere above us. Between those pulses lay a silence that felt heavier than the one in the clearing. We followed what looked like a narrow trail. It might have been the old logging road. It might not. The land dipped where it should have been flat. Trees I thought I knew were gone. Once I looked back, needing proof we were making progress. There were no footprints behind us. Don't let go, Laura whispered. Her grip tightened. If you let go, it can take you instead. The storm quieted again. In that hush, another sound rose from deep in the woods. Mark. My name. No radio this time. No static. Just a man's voice. Steady and familiar. My father. I stopped before I meant to. The sound came again, to my right. Mark. Over here, son. I turned my head. My flashlight beam swept over trunks and drifting snow. Nothing else. But my chest squeezed. I knew that tone. Don't, Laura said sharply. That's not him. It sounds like him, I said. My voice sounded thin even to me. That's what it does, she said. It digs through you. Find the voices you miss. The things you wish you could fix. It puts them on so you'll walk where it wants you. Mark. The voice called again, closer. I could almost see him, tall in uniform, snow on his hat brim. Come give me a hand. Long night ahead. For a second I wasn't in the woods. I was a kid riding shotgun in his cruiser, watching snow streak past the windows, feeling proud just to be there. He's gone, Laura said quietly. You know that. If you chase that sound, you won't find your father. You'll walk until there's nothing left that's really you. I looked down and saw I'd taken a half step toward the voice. Laura yanked my hand. You promised, she said. You told that old man you wouldn't answer if it called your name. Harlan's warning came back clear. If it calls your name, don't answer. I shut my eyes, pulled in a rough breath. Let it out. Not tonight. I whispered. Not like this. When I opened my eyes, the path ahead had shifted again. The trees leaning like ribs, but through gaps I saw a thin strip of open space, like a road cutting through the storm. It felt both close and far. We're almost there, I said, just a little farther. That's what it wants you to think, Laura muttered, but she kept moving. Her hand dug into mine. We walked. The cold sharpened with each step. It stopped feeling like air and turned into tiny needles pressing into my skin. Behind us, something slid over the snow, not crunching footsteps. A soft dragging, like a heavy shape gliding just above the ground. Laura's grip spasmed. It's here, she breathed. The air around us tightened. The storm's pulse slowed. The trees seemed to lean in. Don't look, she whispered. Just keep going. But the dragging sound came closer, slow and patient. The back of my neck burned. The part of me that still remembered being an animal before a trooper screamed that I had to see it. I turned. It stood in the trail 20 feet behind us. Tall, thin, white as packed snow. Its body was stretched just past human shape, arms too long, legs too narrow, as if someone had pulled it taller than it should be. Snow did not touch it. Flakes curved around its outline, bending away. Where its face should have been, there was only shifting blur. The more I tried to focus, the less I could see. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw my father's jaw. Then it smeared into nothing. The air around it felt old and heavy, like air that had been trapped and forgotten. It lifted one long arm and reached toward Laura. Cold poured off that motion like a blast. My breath froze in my throat. My eyes burned. Laura choked, shrinking against my back. Frost formed along her hair and lashes. No, I said. I had nothing here that made sense as a weapon. All I had was one thin line I still believed in. I stepped in front of her, dragging her behind me, and planted myself between her and the watcher. You're not taking her, I said. My voice shook. She's going home. For a long second, nothing moved. Snow hung in the air. The storm hissed, then quieted. Even my own pulse felt far away. Then the white watcher bent. It leaned down, slow and smooth, until whatever counted as its face hovered inches from mine. The cold pouring off it dug straight into my bones. Its knot mouth opened. Mark, it whispered, my father's voice. The world collapsed into cold and darkness. One moment the watcher leaned close, whispering my name in my father's voice, and the next the ground slid out from under me. Sound stretched thin. My vision folded inward like snow drifting over a dying fire. I felt Laura's fingers slip from mine, the cold pulling her away, or maybe pulling me under. Then nothing. No storm. No trees. Just a long black quiet. When I opened my eyes, everything was still. I lay on my back in a shallow drift beside my cruiser. My headlights glowed softly through thinning flakes. The red and blue lights no longer flashed. The engine rumbled low, as if it had been idling for hours. The storm had moved on, leaving a pale gray sky and the kind of quiet that only comes after something violent. For a moment, I didn't move. My thoughts felt heavy and slow, like they were stuck under ice. My breath fogged the air in weak clouds. When I finally pushed myself upright, every muscle ached. My coat was stiff with frost. My gloves were gone. The clearing, Laura, the watcher, it all slipped around in my memory, like it didn't want to be held. I staggered to the cruiser door. The metal was warm under my fingers. Too warm. When I looked down, I saw why. A perfect ring of melted snow circled the vehicle. A full 10-foot radius of exposed dirt and wet ground steamed gently in the cold morning air. Everything outside that ring was frozen solid, untouched by any heat the world should have offered that night. Below zero temperatures. No reason for melting. No explanation I could put in any report. My radio crackled weakly from inside the cruiser. I fumbled it up to my mouth. Unit 12, dispatch said, "Do you copy? We lost you in the storm." I forced air into my lungs. "I'm here," I said. My voice sounded far away. I'm okay." They asked for my position. I gave it. I didn't mention Laura. I didn't mention the watcher. I didn't mention the circle of melted snow, or the shadow that stretched the wrong way, or the voice that wasn't my father. Some things don't fit inside radio static. A few minutes later, another trooper arrived. He helped me into his cruiser, wrapped me in a blanket, and kept glancing at me like he was waiting for me to say something that made sense. I didn't. Search teams found Laura Bishop later that afternoon. She was farther north, near an old trail that hadn't been used in decades. She was confused, dehydrated, frostbitten, and alive. When they carried her out on a stretcher, she kept asking if the storm was over. She didn't recognize my name when they told her who found her vehicle. She didn't remember me at all. Doctors said hypothermia and trauma can erase memories. Maybe, but when she looked up at me from the hospital bed, just for a second, her eyes clouded over the same pale way they had in the woods. Then they cleared, and she blinked like she'd seen a stranger. Harlan Pike's body was never found. We searched 2 days, combing the woods with dogs and snowmobiles. Nothing. No tracks. No shed. Not even a scrap of his wool coat. It was as if he had stepped into the storm and become part of it. The logger shed I had dragged him into wasn't there either, where it should have been sat untouched snow, smooth as cream, no depressions, no wooden boards, no rusted roof. One of the guys joked that I must have mixed up the spot. I didn't answer. I wasn't sure I could. 3 days later, when the roads finally opened, I drove back to the old Warden cabin. I told myself I just wanted to check it again to make sure I hadn't imagined the journal or the maps or the strange circles on Elias Crowley's papers. When I pushed the door open, the hinge squeaked like it hadn't moved in months. The inside was bare. No maps, no papers, no tools, no dust on the floor, like someone had swept the whole place clean. The cot was gone. Even the stove had been dragged out. Only the empty outline on the wall showed where it had once been. The boards were lighter where the shelf had been. The journal wasn't there. The cabin felt hollow, like it had swallowed its own history. I closed the door quietly and stood outside for a long time, listening to the wind in the pines. It sounded normal. It sounded safe. But my stomach twisted anyway. When I returned to the barracks, I filled out a report. I included everything that fit inside the world of my badge. Missing person located, elderly male believed deceased, severe storm conditions, possible hallucinations due to exposure, disorientation, near hypothermic symptoms. I did not mention the watcher. I did not mention the melting snow. I did not mention the clearing where the storm refused to fall. I did not mention how my father's voice had come out of something tall and white and wrong. My supervisor read the report and nodded slowly. "You were out in that blizzard longer than any of us," he said. "Your brain can play tricks. Whiteout makes people hear things, see things. Storm stress. Perfectly normal." I nodded back, even though nothing inside me agreed. A week passed. The snow hardened into crust. Life slid back into its usual patterns. But I couldn't stop thinking about the storm, about the tall, pale figure gliding over the snow. One night, after a late shift, I went to my locker. My hands were shaking for no reason at all. I opened the metal door. It was sitting on the top shelf. The wooden charm from the tree branch. The same cuts. The same rough edges. The same old leather loop. I hadn't taken it. I hadn't touched it since the night I saw it swinging in the storm. For a long time, I stood there staring at it, the locker room silent around me. Then I closed the door and backed away like the charm might leap out. I drove home that night, listening to the wind drag over the cruiser roof. I kept checking the mirror, half expecting to see a tall white shape gliding behind me. I still don't know why the storm let me go. Maybe it was because I pulled Laura behind me in that clearing. Maybe it was because I didn't answer when it called my name. Or maybe, just maybe, it was because my father had once stood exactly where I stood and survived, and the Watcher likes to keep certain families close, the way the woods keep secrets buried under snow. I'll never know. Storms come, storms go, but some things stay. And sometimes, on cold nights, I still hear it whisper my name.